I got the idea how to start breaking into, actually making money or trying to make a name for yourself as an artist. And I thought I get that question a lot, actually. People email me and message me on Instagram and kind of ask me what I did, at the beginning of my career to kind of get the ball rolling. So I'm sure it's, a lot of what I'm covering might be intuitive or things that you've already thought of, but for many of you, it might answer some questions that you yourselves will have, especially as you've gotten to a point where you've been in this course for a year, or some of you for 2 years already, making a lot of progress, painting a lot. I've seen a lot of you getting outdoors and painting, and you're even posting things about getting into shows and everything, which is great. So, but anyways, I hope that some of the things that I touch base on here in this recording will help you. And again, a lot of it were things that I did when I was starting out. So the first thing you can do, and I've noticed some of you have been posting, you've been taking part in like urban sketchers groups. I think that's a great idea. Number one, it's important to start making contacts in the business. You never know who you're going to run into at some of these events. So the more times you can get yourself out there, not only in the public's eye, but amongst fellow artists, it just kind of gives you a good idea of where you stand also with your own work when you're out painting with a lot of other people. And these sketch groups are usually very informal. A lot of the people in there are not professional artists. So it's a good way to just kind of dip into things and get your toes wet, and meet some like-minded souls and have a great time doing it. Okay, and you can see from some of these photos I grabbed from urban sketch groups around the country. I think this is Portland, Oregon, from their Facebook page, which is a great way to find these in your own area, by the way. Just kind of search for them on Facebook. A lot of them have a social media presence, and that's where they announce their gatherings and stuff. So if you're interested in that, painting outside is just a lot more comfortable to paint in a group when you're not so isolated. It can be a little bit nerve-wracking when you're out there by yourself. So again, this is just kind of a nice way to start getting out there. And this, this just kind of snowballs off of what you've been doing in this group with this community of people learning painting. Only now you'll be a little bit more face-to-face and being able to interact with people. And again, maybe get some feedback on your work directly from other artists and like-minded souls. And the nice thing is, you're seeing people from all walks of life, all ages, genders, everything. So again, I think that's a nice way for some of you, especially some of you as you're starting to get out and do some plein air work. I've noticed you've been talking about and posting that you've joined a little local plein air group and sketching group. So if you haven't done that yet, and you're thinking about it, I would highly recommend it, because I'm sure those of you who have enjoyed the experience quite a bit. Another thing I did early on was I joined a critique group with some friends that I met at the Minnesota Watercolor Society. And once a month, we'd all take turns hosting a lunch at our house. That bottom photo is our dining room with all our friends there. And we would provide lunch for everybody. And then we'd all bring what we'd been working on. And it usually lasted, 3 or 4 hours, most of the afternoon. But it was, again, just a nice way to socialize, meet like-minded souls, and get feedback on your work, which is very important. Okay, right now, if you're just taking a workshop, if you're just relying on my critiques, you're only getting feedback from a very limited amount of sources. And again, I know this is just kind of snowballing off of this Facebook group, because you post things in the group, and a lot of your fellow students are commenting on it and giving you feedback. But this is a nice way. We kind of had 10 or 12 members that we all trusted, and we knew we were kind of on the same career path, pretty close to the same level of painting. We were all professionals at this point. And the neat thing was, as you look at that Zoom screen up above there, everybody's styles were different. The lady on the top left had a studio in Minneapolis, and she had a real kind of a funky style. She did a lot of cards and calendars and even like puzzle covers and stuff. A lot of urban scenes of people walking around the city. Karen Knutson, top in the middle there, has really come a long way in her career. She's been winning a lot of awards in national shows and teaching a lot. I'm sure many of you have heard of her. She was in our critique group. Mary Sue Kruger at the top right was a pet portrait artist. She would get a lot of commissions on painting dogs and cats and things. Middle row on the left was Keith Donaldson. He was just a retired guy. He wasn't really a professional artist, but had been painting almost his whole life. And the funny thing is, out of this group, I think 6 of us were previous Minnesota Watercolor Society presidents. So it was kind of a president's club too. And then myself in the middle there. And Pat Undis in the middle on the right. She's a very established local artist, and she also does a lot of pastel work along with her watercolors. She takes place in plein air events. She was a high school art teacher for many years. Bottom left is one of my best friends, Dan Weimer, again a very successful artist. He's got this really cool style where he combines acrylic and watercolor, and the Canadian group of 7 are his influences. If you see his work, Dan Weimer, Weimer, if you look him up, you'll see the similarities to a lot of those Canadian painters from the past. And then Gail Speckman, bottom in the middle, she again very accomplished professional artist and writer. She would bring poems in and artwork to match her poetry, and she had written a lot of books. And then Dave Rickert, bottom right, was an acrylic painter, and he ended up moving out to California. This is one of the last meetings we had when he attended via Zoom call from the beach with his dog. But again, it's important, I think, to find people around the same level as you and support each other and get that all-important feedback. So if you haven't been in something like that, again, I would suggest you at least find maybe 4 or 5 friends that you can get together with once in a while and show your work, because it's real easy to just kind of get into this vacuum of getting feedback from your spouse or your friends or family, and to get some honest opinions from. And again, I would try and search out a wide variety. We'd bring our work in, and I'm a landscape painter. I'm getting advice from people who do a lot more stylized work, and Karen's work is very abstract, and they had great suggestions, not looking at it through the lens of a landscape painter, but just from a different style. So it helped my work tremendously to be part of this group. And then along with that, joining local watercolor societies or art societies was a big thing. I joined the Minnesota Watercolor Society. This is an old photo of me, wow. And started entering their shows and making friends, going to their meetings. They had meetings once a month on Thursday nights, and I think I was a member for about a year, and they asked me to start serving on the board. I did the newsletter for a while and then served as president for a few years. But that's a great way, again, to get exhibition opportunities. You join these local watercolor societies. They almost all have at least one annual show, if not 2. Minnesota Watercolor Society had a fall show and a spring show. So you could kind of get your feet wet entering shows and exhibitions without trying to enter, the big national ones. It was more of a local group, and it was just a lot more comfortable to just kind of learn the ropes that way. That's nerve-wracking entering shows when you're first starting off, and I wouldn't suggest just jumping right up to AWS and NWS right away. Try and find some smaller venues where you can exhibit your work and just get it out there and get it seen. But another thing that came of this was I never really considered teaching that much. But when you're in these groups, they're trying to find members to do demonstrations and talks at the meetings. And I was never comfortable getting up in front of people and being, being the one that everybody's looking at. And that really helped me get over my fear of, being in the spotlight a little bit, and doing the demonstrations for people who, it's a friendly crowd. There were people I knew, very little pressure. And so doing things like that, it started to become much more comfortable. And then when I started to get asked to actually teach workshops, I had that experience of, being up and doing some demonstrations for smaller groups. And again, everybody's very supportive. But I've come a long way in my career. This was, when I first joined that group was probably 25 years ago already. And so again, you're learning a lot. You're not only getting asked to demonstrate yourself possibly, but attending other demonstrators. We had all sorts of great programs in the evenings. And then again, once I started getting asked to start, do some demonstrations and lectures and talking for their groups, it really kind of catapulted my teaching career. So, I don't know if any of you want to, teach or do this sort of thing, but again, it's all about trying to make a name for yourself, make connections. Social media is a great way to do that too these days. Back when I started doing this, there wasn't Instagram and Facebook and everything. So this was a nice way to get some kind of a public presence in front of people. And Chris was asking me about galleries, and I'm not in many galleries, and to be honest, I've had really good luck in like 2 or 3 galleries, and then some of them just kind of stagnate, and I have work there and I forget the paintings are there and I don't really hear from them. It's tough to sell work in galleries, not only for the fact that just getting into them, because a lot of gallery owners, especially in this country, aren't really interested in watercolors, unfortunately. So a great substitute for that is little local coffee shops and diners. And again, I'm sure many of you have done this or realized this before, but some of you may not. You're just thinking, oh boy, I want to exhibit my artwork, I need to get into a gallery to get my work in the public's eye. And galleries are a very niche market. Okay, the people that come there are usually a little more high end. They're looking for to spend a little bit more money on high end artwork. But so when you're first starting out, you're getting your artwork in front of a lot of eyes in these public places. Okay, I found my chiropractor here in Hastings really liked my watercolors, and we barter. And he has a masseuse there. I get a package of chiropractic adjustments and massages, and he gets a painting, and then when the package runs out, he goes and picks out another painting. And I walk into his office now, and it's like one of my galleries. And I go in there, and there's people sitting in the waiting room, and Doc comes out and, hey, Andy, and then he starts telling everybody, this is the artist, who does all this stuff. I've gotten commissions that way. You can talk to your dentist's office if you see the walls are empty. Even the local Hastings library ages ago, the director at the library was a fan of my work, and he would just kind of go onto my website. He must have gone on there every week, because if I ended up with some kind of a local scene from Hastings, I'd get an email from him then asking me how much it was, and they would use their funds to purchase some of my watercolors. And it's a little embarrassing. I go in there now. This was a long time ago, and those watercolors that I did 20 years ago are still hanging on the walls of the library. But again, it got my name out there locally. Think of how many people are walking through a library or a coffee shop or a doctor's office every day versus a gallery. Okay, so it's something to think about. I found this article on Jerry's Artorama about tips. They had a nice little kind of a blog about getting it into the local coffee shops, and it made a lot of good points. Okay, they like to rotate artists out, unlike galleries. They get their established artists. Every once in a while they'll invite a new artist in, but a lot of the galleries, they kind of have the artists that they want in there now, and they just ask those artists for new work. Whereas some of these places, they like to kind of rotate the work out every few months, and keep it new and engaging. So that's another benefit of it. and like I was saying, you're going to get, much bigger exposure to a wider audience, and people who are going to be, looking more towards buying work from artists who are just kind of breaking into things. And that last point is interesting also. There's always the possibility that a painting or other piece draws the attention of the local media, and that has happened to me as well. I've been asked to get interviewed in the Minneapolis Star Tribune. They've seen my work at a local hospital, and the arts writer wrote about my work, unbeknownst to me. I didn't even know she had gone to see the exhibition there. So it's all about just getting your work in places, out in front of people. There's a lot of options other than just galleries to get started with. Alrighty. Art fairs. My friend Dan Weimer from that earlier Zoom call that I was telling you about, the guy that likes the group of 7 paintings, he's a very successful artist, and pretty much all he does is art fairs. I did art fairs when I first started out, locally here in Minneapolis, the Dinah Art Fair and the Uptown Art Fair, some other smaller ones around the area, but they are a great way when your price point, is still low. And people were coming out there when I was first doing the art fairs. I think my paintings were around $500 or $600, framed paintings, and I sold a lot of those. And I had a few prints, but it was mostly just originals. I was never really interested in the print market. I just wanted to keep painting and do new paintings. So once my price point started to hover up a little bit closer to between $800 and $1,000, I kind of, it's a little bit more difficult at art fairs when you're in there and people are selling stuff for $50 everywhere and $100 or whatever, and then all of a sudden they're coming into a booth and there's $900, $1,000 paintings, and that's when I stopped doing them. But my friend Dan makes prints of his work, and he brings the originals framed very nicely to the art fair, and then he has, in the print rack are all these print versions of it, and every once in a while somebody will still drop $1,500, $1,800, whatever, $2,000 on the original framed painting. But he says it's like printing money, those prints, people going through there because they see that original. And sadly, I mean, for people like me who only want to sell originals, a lot of the market comes up and the buyers, and they see it and they see the price and they say, do you have a print of that? So that might be something you want to look into as well. Getting prints of your work is fairly easy. If you're going to get decent prints, you're going to want to get them scanned somewhere. Find a local business that actually does a scan of your work, and they can print giclée prints on watercolor paper. That's what I would suggest. But if you get enough of them, they're probably, you can get them for like $25 a piece and then sell them for, I know, 100 or whatever. That's a pretty good markup on prints. So and like I said, Dan does that almost year round. He goes to a couple down in Florida in the wintertime, and then up locally here all summer. I barely see him because he's like in one art fair after another all summer, just kind of jumping around the area, and very successful that way. So something to think about when you're getting started out. Again, it's all about getting your work seen, and the mobs in some of these art fairs, and they're there. Yes, a lot of people are just there to look and spend the day outside, but a lot of people are there to buy. So it's a good market. All right, another thing I did early on was I went to the local schools, and when my kids were in elementary school, they had a community ed program called Picture Person, and they asked for parent volunteers to come in, and they had it all kind of set like a little curriculum in a portfolio. Every month it had a different theme, and I would go in with some reproductions of famous paintings, and they'd have an outline of points that I wanted to talk about with the kids. And sadly, we all know that arts programs are the first to go in public schools. And so this gave the kids a chance to kind of break their day up a little bit and get an art education. And it was really fun to get it out there and do that. And then later on, when my kids were in high school, excuse me, I was getting asked by the high school art teachers to come in and talk to these students, because a lot of that, by that point, I was a professional medical illustrator and starting my watercolor career. And it was really inspiring, for these high school kids to realize that, boy, you can make a living in art. You don't have to be a starving artist. So I did that a few times, coming in and lecturing to them. But again, that was a nice opportunity to meet people, and these kids would go home and talk about, oh, we had this local artist coming in there. Their parents might have never even heard of me before, but they got their kids excited about it, and then they wander into my studio gallery in Hastings, and I still see, it's kind of funny, every once in a while I'll still see one of those kids at a grocery checkout or something locally, and I don't recognize them. It's been forever, but they're like, "You were a picture person." It's kind of cute. So yeah, that's just something to think about. Not just schools. I've done it at the local old folks home as well, retirement homes, just to break up their day. You can go in there and paint with them. Just have a real simple little lesson. That's a nice way to break in, if you're thinking about doing a little bit of teaching as well. Just to kind of get your feet wet and get comfortable doing that, come up with some simple little art plans for people like that. So and everybody was thrilled to have you come in and volunteer to do that. Plein air events. Chris said he just took part in the White Bear Lake plein air event, and he was talking about a lot of the artists that he met there, and that's again a great way not only to kind of gauge where you're at in your career and compared to some of these professional artists, but just to meet people. People are out there painting, you're standing next to each other, you can start to visit, getting ideas, bouncing ideas off of each other. That all this is so important in your artistic career. Okay. I'm a little bit of an introvert. I don't mind being alone, but those times that I get to spend with groups of fellow artists out on location are just great memories. I always have so much fun doing that. That photo on the bottom there is the Door County Plein Air Festival. I'm not sure how many of the big plein air festivals do this, but you have to be juried in to most of the big ones, okay, including Door County. They invite the artists in, you don't submit an application. But on the last day of the Door County plein air event in Wisconsin, they have a quick paint, and they invite anybody who wants to come out and join that morning quick paint to do it. And then they have a big tent by where the actual show is going to be. They have a separate tent for all those people, and they put their work in there on an easel. And then the artists that have been juried into the show, we all walk through and vote on like 3 or 4 of our favorite paintings, and they tally the numbers. And I think it's the top 2 artists that win that vote count get invited to the show the next year. So it's kind of a big deal. And again, getting your work out there for a lot of people to see. And it's not just the artists going through this tent, it's the buying public as well. And a lot of the buying public, they're going to walk through the big show, and see paintings. Some of these oil painters, their paintings are $5,000-$6,000. And then so they'll go through the other tent and see a lot of good work, decent work, and priced a lot more reasonably. So that's a good way to just start building your collector base and getting your work in front of eyes as well. And these plein air competitions are everywhere now. They're so popular. So I'm fairly certain no matter where you live, you can find at least one, if not 5 or 6, that you can attend if you find the time to do it. And again, it's a lot of fun. And one of the things I did very early on, once my work was starting to get better, I wouldn't suggest, reaching out to magazine editors right away. But once you're kind of comfortable and you've maybe, gotten into some of the local shows and maybe even won an award or 2, I just reached out. People asked me, how did you get into American Artist magazine? And I wrote an email. I went, on the front of the magazine, they have the list of the editors and all that, and their contact emails. And after my second trip to China, I just wrote an email to Stephen Doherty, who was the editor of American Artist magazine at the time, and explained to him who I was and who I was there with, other artists, and just kind of a unique art trip. and asked him, would you be interested in having that in the magazine? And he just emailed me back the next day. He said, yeah, that'd be great. And are you willing to write it? So I wrote a nice article and had several of my paintings and photos that I took from it. And that was one of the first magazine articles I ever got. And again, it was all just because I made initial contact with them. So it's a lot of these, watercolor artists. They have a lot of established artists in there, and a lot of kind of educational type articles, step by steps, and those kinds of things. And most of the time, they're contacting established artists for that. But there's a lot of these art magazines that are willing to publish something interesting. It might not be an 8-page spread or anything, but I think it's more useful to have, even if it's a 1-page little article on an art trip you took with friends to someplace interesting with your work, that you can talk about to people, than trying to spend the full page ads in these magazines are like $1,500, $2,000 to take out an ad, and those ads, people, they're kind of stuck in the back of the magazine. So it's a lot easier to have a 1-page little article on an art trip that you took, and you're doing their job for them. They have to sit there and think about those people. They're trying to reach out to artists and come up with ideas every month and put together the layout and come up with new ideas. So yeah, you might get turned down a few times before you get a nibble. That's the way it always works. But again, I wouldn't recommend you took a day trip to the beach with your husband and nephew and painted. Don't do that. But if you do something interesting, like especially an overseas trip, an international trip or something like that, or if something interesting happens to you, Plein Air magazine is always looking for little stories of people painting outside. So if you think it's worth sharing with them, they've been shown themselves to be more than willing to publish those kinds of things. So, but anyways, that's a lot of questions that I get. Like I said, when you're first starting out, I know it's confusing, and everybody's at different levels and isn't really sure what they want to accomplish or how to break into the market. And I'm sure there are, many, many more ideas out there, and this can get the conversation started anyways for in the group. If people can think of other things that they've done, please share them into the Facebook group after this video comes out and people start talking about it. It'd be great to get that conversation going, because I'm sure most of you have the similar kind of questions. And again, that's what kind of prompted me to do this. I'm talking to Christian over lunch, and I just kind of realized that I get these questions a lot. So I thought it might be kind of nice to give you a little bit of a background on things that I did when I first started out, on top of just painting and painting and painting and then painting some more. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hope this was helpful. Hi, my name's Andy Evanson. Over the course of this year, I'll be discussing a lot of ways to improve your paintings, with a focus on watercolor in particular. Watercolor is a popular medium, but there are technical issues that can become stumbling blocks during the learning process. Painting becomes a lot more fun once you solve them and can start refining your craft. I'll cover topics that are unique to watercolor, such as painting wet and wet, the timing and consistency of your washes, the importance of drawing and negative shade making, and more. I'll also be talking a lot about how vital it is to have a plan. The transparent nature of watercolor means you're limited in the amount of fixing you can do once you've started, and indecisiveness, that's what leads to the weak, muddy paintings. Because this course spans a calendar year, you'll be able to see me painting outdoors on location as well as in the studio. We can talk about the differences and similarities of both. I've taught dozens of 3 to 5 day workshops, and most of the time, just as students are starting to figure things out, it's time to say goodbye. This course through Tucson Art Academy Online allows me to work with you for an entire year, so we'll be able to get into things that just aren't possible in a 4-day workshop. As an artist who also loves to teach, I'm really excited about the possibilities of this. I hope you'll join me.